Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Constitution podcast. I was just thinking before I came on how I need to get more creative with my introduction here, but I'll work on that. I'm here today with Amber Cummings. She is a mental freedom evangelist and coach. We're going to dig into exactly what that means, but I will start you off with the forecast of she is owner and founder of Mental Health Rebels Coaching. It is focused on supporting individuals who are coming off pharmaceuticals from a holistic lens. So I'm going to let her share more all about this. Find this area really interesting and empowering. So I heard Amber talk at a virtual retreat I did recently, and it was very compelling, and she was so just nice to listen to and learn from. And so I had to ask her to come share with you all. So
I
hello,
am
Amber.
I'm so honored to be here. It's such a delight. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome. I feel like people need to watch this podcast episode because your shirt is so cool.
I got this in Peru. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
you
darling.
did?
It's a
I love
poncho.
Peru. I've been to Peru too. Yes. Amazing. Peru is awesome. Such a beautiful place.
We were just talking about cacao because I live here in Mexico and I love cacao, and Peru also has amazing cacao, and I find it to be a very deeply spiritual, magical place. So when I put
Yeah,
this
it
on,
is.
I feel like I've got the magical vibes.
Definitely. I know. When we went to Machu Picchu, and this is also back when I was drinking super heavily. So if I felt the spiritual extraterrestrial almost. Like it feels like when you're in Machu Picchu, you're like, oh yeah, there's definitely some spiritual stuff. Definitely probably aliens landed here. I don't know, but I
Oh,
felt
for
it
sure.
too, for sure.
Where I was staying in the Sacred Valley, there, and I stayed there for a while, so I could see the mountains from my room, and there were these crazy blue lights that would flash, and it looked like lightning, but they were blue. And I started asking people, I was like, "What is that?" And they're like, "Nobody knows, but it happens all the time. Everybody's seen it." It's like, "Oh, okay." And where I live in Mexico actually is known to be the number one alien spotting place in all of Mexico. It is pretty witchy and
What?
wild as well. Yeah, I like spiritual mountains.
Yeah, and also forget the pharmaceuticals. Let's talk about aliens now.
Yeah, for sure.
Like change of agenda today. No, yeah, no, I find all that stuff really interesting. John and I always get really into all the different, alien documentaries. They're quite interesting to watch. Um, so yes, okay. Well, I'm gonna dig in with the big, this is a huge question first, but I know that a big part of the work that you do is really rooted in your own journey coming off pharmaceuticals as you were on them since I think you were 12, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, not really amazing, amazing coming off and
Yeah.
being able to like find your way through that. And so I want to really hear, what was it like your experience being on pharmaceuticals from that young of an age? And also, like after being on them for so long and kind of having it be your normal, I would love to hear more about what prompted you to even think to get off of them.
Yeah. It certainly was a big journey because I had such a gigantic paradigm shift between my beliefs. Because when you're young, when you're 12 years old, you believe what the doctors and your parents tell you. And I remember quite vividly when I was 12, it was anorexia that landed me in the doctor's office. I stopped eating. I was protesting. I had my home was a pretty controlling environment, and anorexia is actually very common in teenagers who feel like they have no control because your food is something that feels like it's in your control. So I even look back at that and I go, I don't think that I ever was broken mentally. I was protesting. I was doing what I
Mhm.
could, and I ended up getting controlled from the inside. I didn't have a choice when I complained about my drugs and said they didn't feel good, they were causing me side effects, blah blah blah. My parents were like, you have to take those, end of story. if I didn't take them. I had my psychiatrist tell on me at one point in time and I got in big trouble. Like, so there was a very interesting start to all of this where it wasn't something that I necessarily chose consciously as an adult. But I believed that story, and I really believed that I was born profoundly broken and there was something wrong with me and that I would need to be medicated for life. And I was told I had anxiety and depression and bipolar. And I came from a family where those things were common and part of our family history. And so it made sense. And also in the 90s, the mainstream narrative was very much this chemical imbalance thing, which now has been proven, the moon and back over, that is not true. What we know now is taking these substances actually causes a chemical imbalance. And we were talking earlier a little bit about like conspiracy theories. It is super fascinating to find out how that narrative even came to be. It was Prozac in a marketing campaign that came up with, oh, these substances fix a chemical imbalance in your brain. And
I hear people say
mainstream,
that still, not about
mainstream,
Prozac, but I hear people still say all the time, well, some people have chemical imbalances, and so I would love for you to elaborate more on this. Yeah.
this is just not true. It's simply not true. When we experience emotional suffering, our neurotransmitter levels do go up and down, and we can be out of balance. That is totally correct. However, the idea that it's like, I had doctors tell me that it was like I was a diabetic and I needed to take my insulin. That is simply not true. Our brains don't work that way. It's not like your brain is broken and has an imbalance. And the thing is, you go to these doctors and it's not like somebody is measuring your insulin. You don't go to the doctor and they don't like take a blood sample and tell you if your serotonin levels are up or down.
Hmm.
They give you a questionnaire, and those questionnaires are designed by the pharmaceutical companies. And so even the way that we get diagnosed is quite bunk, right? And the idea that there is something wrong with you if you are feeling pain and emotional suffering is also very incorrect, in my opinion, because you think about our bodies as a system, as an organism. If I get a cut on my hand or on my wrist or I break my arm, I'm going to be in horrible pain. And it is because I need medical attention. I need first aid. And our emotional world, our internal system works the same way. And so I just told the story about being a young child who didn't know what to do, who was experiencing a lot of emotional pain, but it's because something was very wrong in my little world. And I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't have adult coping mechanisms, and I didn't have adults who knew how to guide me through that because
Hmm.
they were also suffering from pretty imbalanced internal worlds, right? And so I think that when we experience this emotional suffering, it has legit root causes. There is a wound, there is a problem, there is something very out of balance. So then we feel awful. And if we go to the doctor and they're like, oh, well, it's because your neurotransmitters are off. Here, take this pill. Like, that doesn't fix it. That's not first aid for emotional
Yeah.
pain. That is just putting a band-aid on the wound and numbing us. So the way that the drugs
And
actually
also
work.
perpetuating that kind of, you have an issue, take this, get rid of it, instead of get curious, what could this be? What is actually causing this? And I think that immediate gratification, lack of inner work combined together is a really scary kind of culture that we could keep perpetuating.
Well, and even talking about, I know that you talk about alcoholism a lot. Like, alcoholism is, or just alcohol in general, like these are substances that numb us and put us asleep so that we can't feel things. And that's the same way that a lot of these drugs work. I mean, SSRIs, which are the most common antidepressants, there's so many people that take them. It literally means selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. It inhibits the ability of your brain to move chemicals around. It shuts down your brain. It is freezing your ability to feel. And so these drugs are just assisted numbing. So
Mhm.
whatever was originally going on, it doesn't go away by putting that band-aid over it. It just gets like disassociated, numbed out. And I actually think that over time, when you have a story like mine, where I was on these drugs for, 20 plus years, those problems just keep festering. And that's what happened in my case. Like, coming back to my story here.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm very like enraptured right now if you can't tell, so don't worry.
Oh, yes.
I'm
Okay.
like,
Well, I
yes.
shall continue then. Um, so I really believed that I was profoundly broken and began taking these drugs and thought that they could fix me. And they couldn't. They could not fix the deep root problems that I had going on. And the fact that I was so unaware and kind of spiraling through life actually created all sorts of additional trauma that I later had to work through. And I really did act like a crazy person. I was pretty up and down and all over the place emotionally. I had hyperventilating and panic attacks. I ended up in the hospital multiple times. I was a smoker and a drinker and eventually became a full-on alcoholic. I had absolute meltdowns where I literally knelt in the street screaming and was picked up by the ambulance and had to spend the night in the hospital. I went out on disability for multiple jobs. Like, it just kept getting uglier and uglier until in my mid 30s, I reached a point where I was like, this is unsustainable. And I had two suicide attempts. And it was after my second suicide attempt that I woke up and I was pretty horrified that it hadn't worked. I was like, I can't believe I'm still alive. And I felt just stuck in life. Because I had hurt myself pretty bad. And I realized, well, if I keep trying to kill myself, I could end up disabled and stuck in my body and not even be able to move. Like, that sounds even worse. And so I finally got to this point where I was like, I can't keep trying to kill myself. Like, I'm stuck on planet Earth. Like, what do I do? And I realized, like, I've been taking these drugs for 20 years and they're not working. Like, it's not fixing me. I am not getting better. All of my worst mental health issues have happened while I was heavily medicated. And in fact, these drugs were involved in many of these, major difficult events. Because I think, like, I took benzos, and mixing benzos and alcohol is just a big disaster, right? I would have blackouts and nights that I didn't remember. And so I think in some ways, they disassociated me, but I also think they compounded a lot of my problems and added to this chaos and crazy. And so I started looking at more holistic options, and I worked with somebody who did supplements for a while. But the truth is, like, you can't swap out psych drugs for supplements. It's still me trying to fix myself by putting a substance in my body. And I don't think that works. Like, I had to eventually realize that the medicine I needed was inside of me and activate my own healing in order to begin getting well. And before I was able to really tackle the psych drugs, I had to deal with my alcoholism, which was a few years that I was like just trying to clean up my act and start practicing basic self-care. Yoga was amazing for me. That was like my healing gateway. I began taking these yoga classes. And the second suicide attempt that I had corresponded with a really big physical collapse as well. I had a left hip surgery, and then I hurt my left shoulder in that suicide attempt. And I literally lost the use of the left side of my body for about 9 months. It was very intense. And this was like
Whoa.
in the worst of my depression. I was just so collapsed. And in an attempt to help myself and start rehabilitating, I started going to these very gentle restorative yoga classes, and it was beautiful because at the same time I began rereading all of these old diaries that I had in a box in my closet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have just been so miserable and so unhappy my whole life. And I was reading my own voice, and I was saying the most awful things to myself. I was just like, I hate you. You don't deserve to be alive. Of course, no one loves you. You're worthless. I wish I could peel off my skin and escape my body, and just books and books of a dialogue like that. And at the same time, I'm going to these restorative yoga classes where they're like talking about self-love and compassion. And it hit me. It was like somehow I got two and two put together in my brain. And I was like, well, no wonder I'm not thriving. I'm by myself all the time. This is the only voice that I'm listening to. Like if you talk to anyone like this, they would be unwell. Like I have to be nice to myself. And there
Oh,
was this day in like a yoga class where the teacher's like, could you just give yourself a little bit of compassion in this moment? And it hit me. I was like, I could be nice to myself right now. And I started crying. I just began weeping. And I wept all through the yoga class, and I got home and I still crying. Woo! And I sat in front of the mirror. And
then having like a
I
vulnerability hangover for crying, I realized
and
that.
I sat in front of the mirror and I looked myself in the eye and I was like, Amber, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for how awful I've been to you, for how much I have hated you and mistreated you, and for how mean I've been to you. And I promise from this day on, I'm going to start being nice to you and I'm going to start taking care of you. And that was the day that my healing journey began. Like, that was just life changing because when you start taking care of yourself, everything has to change. Like, I had to put good food in my body, and I couldn't stay up until 3 a.m. on the couch drinking bottles of wine. And I got to the point where I was like, I can't keep going to this job because I hate it and I'm taking care of myself. And if I'm taking care of myself, like I can't keep letting these people treat me this way. And it affected my relationships, it affected my self-care. And eventually I ended up leaving the United States. And I continued with all of these yoga practices and gaining these holistic tools. And I went to Bali to a yoga teacher training, and I actually am a yoga teacher training dropout. I did not finish it. I was kind of a mess. I was very upset after selling all my stuff and leaving the United States. It was stressful for me, and I got there and was having just hyperventilating panic attacks every morning in my yoga teacher training. And I had a teacher one day sit with me and help me breathe through a panic attack. And that was the first time in my life. I was like, oh gosh, I must have been like 34, that I breathed through a panic attack instead of taking handfuls of benzos
Yeah,
to
and at
help me.
that point, were you off your medications?
No,
Not
no,
yet.
I was still taking when I made it to Mexico. So I was in Bali, and the big things that happened in Bali, I started really seeing that I could control my internal state with my mind and my breath and my body, that I actually had agency and control. Because for so long, I felt like I was just a victim of my crazy.
Yeah.
And so that was really a big mindset makeover, mindset shift for me. And then when I got to Mexico, and the other thing in Bali is I started chanting mantras. And that has been just a cornerstone, foundational part of my spiritual practice ever since. I still sing mantras. I led kirtan events for a few years here in Mexico. And right now I'm not leading events, but I still just chant mantras to myself every day. And it's a really beautiful meditative practice because you're using your mind, your breath, your attention, your energy, and you have something to do with your hands and with your voice, with your mouth. Singing is so good for the vagus nerve. It helps calm our system. So that has been a life-changing practice for me. But anyways, I didn't graduate from yoga teacher training, although it was great. I learned so many things that enabled me to have a personal yoga practice. So that was really wonderful too. And then I came to Mexico and I began working with a transpersonal therapist here who's just an amazing woman. She's a shaman who I have later did an awesome shamanism training with. And she was like, Amber, you've done all this work. You don't need to be taking these drugs. They are holding you back. Like, you are not able to advance in your spiritual practice if you keep taking these drugs because you don't have access to your full mental capacity. And that was huge for me. Like, I don't think that there's any doctor in the United States who would have said that to me, to someone who has a story like mine. And so she talked me into going off all these drugs, but unfortunately, she was not like a drug withdrawal tapering expert. She was just like, get off of these drugs. But I had been taking, so at that point, I had been taking psych drugs for 22 years daily, and I had been taking a benzo tranquilizer, Klonopin, for 18 years daily. And Klonopin is super, super addictive. Like, that's a substance that really should be tapered off quite slowly, especially for somebody who'd been taking it for years. I was also taking an antidepressant, and I was taking a mood stabilizer.
I feel like it's so interesting. I almost feel like it should be a prerequisite. Like, if you're going to be on all of these things, you should have to do some type of education around alcohol as a depressant on those drugs, or like there should be some kind of examination of willingness to like stop drinking first or to like drink less first, because it's just it seems so crazy that we so willingly give people these medications and don't even like talk to them about their relationship with alcohol.
Oh, for sure. For
It's
sure.
wild.
Well,
But
and both alcohol and I'm gonna come back to this point a little bit later, but both alcohol and benzo tranquilizers work very similar. They work on the cerebellum, which is the part of your brain that's at the base of your skull that controls your motor movements and your ability to walk and talk. And so if you put those two things together, that's like a recipe for blackouts and just things
mhm.
that are not safe happening. And I have a lot of stories in my life where I think the way I behaved was extremely unsafe. It's unfortunate though, I think that if you're in a place where you're trying to numb out and then you add alcohol on top of these substances, it does just amplify that experience. And so if you're in a self-destructive spiral, it actually feels quite attractive and, I mean, pleasant from a sensation perspective, like you achieve the mental escape goal. And so I think it's really common, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
Well,
there's
especially
no
because
control for this stuff.
yeah, and what you mentioned too with the fact that taking these medications, and we've talked and you've shared before, like there is a time and a place for these medications, and um that typically with the intention of, circumstantial, like let's or episodic more so, of like using them in order to help you transition to a better place, but like putting with them just being like, this is for life. But yeah, it is just kind of without healing the root cause, it completely makes sense that kind of subduing symptoms, people would still seek alcohol because it's like, even though maybe you're finding some semblance of like balance because you're removing some of the discomfort associated with the symptoms, you're not actually addressing the root cause. So why wouldn't you continue reaching for something else to help you numb out or check out from the discomfort? So yeah. Never really thought of it that way.
Yeah, yeah, it just is a compounding effect. Well, and I think that a lot of times when you're in these places where you're feeling upset already, you are kind of just looking for something to help you escape from the pain. And
Hmm.
so, gosh, one thing that I can say is I don't use any of these substances now, but I have so much deep compassion for people who are going through these really hard journeys because I have been there. I mean, you will never find any judgment from me. I get it, man. Like
Yeah.
I did some really, really unsafe, unhealthy things. And I think that self-love component is just so pivotal and important. Like, why would I take care of myself if I don't think that I'm worthy of care? If I don't even like myself and I'm just trying to escape my problems and escape me, like there's a huge root problem.
Worthiness. Yeah.
Exactly. Like we have to value our life so much that we're willing to take care of it. And we have to claim our life and decide that we want to give our own selves the best life and protect and care for, this being that is me. Like, I mean, the truth of the matter is, like, why are we even here as humans? We came to this planet to do our unique life. Like, the whole point of my soul coming to planet Earth is to do Amber's life, is to take care of Amber. And the whole point of Katie being here is for you to do the best job ever at being Katie and taking care of Katie. But no one tells us that. Like, nobody taught me that. I was
Yeah.
taught to prioritize other people in front of me. I was taught to do what my parents said. I was taught to be a nice girl all the time. And I didn't connect with that until I was in the darkest place on my knees. And so it would thrill me if somebody listens to this podcast and receives that message. Because that's
Yeah.
the actual point. And if we're not connected to our own world, valuing it and loving it and wanting to take care of ourselves, then we do end up doing these reckless, ugly things because we're actually just trying to escape life and ourselves because it feels vapid and empty. Like we don't have a connection to the point of being alive.
Yeah. The life force is like it wants to come, and I forget if it was you at the retreat or somebody was talking about like, our life force is like in there, and when we keep stifling it, it's just like trying to get out in like other ways. And I think that's a big thing. I know my self-medication was like a lack of connection to deeper meaning and purpose in my life. And I did feel, on a subconscious or soul level, like, I have more to offer here. I know I'm selling myself short. Like, I don't even know where to start to begin to create a meaningful life that lights me up. And so instead, in knowing like that it's going to take a lot of work, whatever that life looks like, I know it's going to. I just procrastinated with substances to check out and be like, I'll deal with that later. And and one thing that came to mind too with what you were saying about your childhood and recognizing that there's a lot of factors that are affecting our children when we pathologize them, like, oh, you have ADD, you have this, you have that. And we look at it as like the kid has an issue as opposed to like getting curious about like what factors maybe this like schooling environment isn't set up for this child to thrive. Maybe there's like an issue at home we don't know about. Maybe there's a communication part missing. And I had a really interesting podcast episode yesterday with a local woman here in Massachusetts who does a lot of neurofeedback with kids.
Mm-hmm.
And she was saying how she really has to like work with families as a whole because she doesn't want a child to feel like you have something wrong with you. It's like this is a whole ecosystem we're talking about. And kids are
Yeah.
really just exhibiting behaviors that are, she's like, they're always trying to communicate with their behaviors. And so just asking, like, what are those behaviors trying to communicate instead of like, this is what's wrong with you.
Yeah. You know, another thing I believe is often these experiences of soul suffering is that we have gifts we're not using, that we were meant to
Mm,
bring to the world or ways of expression. Like, I think children are so massively creative and magical, and then adults don't understand them or encourage that. And then I think also later on in life, I think that often these gifts that we have can kind of torture us until they get to a place where they're recognized. Some of the most magical creatures are people who come to me who are heavily medicated and think that they're really broken. And it turns out that they're like sensitive, intuitive. Sometimes people hear
psychic.
voices or see things or like the kinds of gifts that might have been valued in a shamanic culture in many, many ancient years ago. But in our modern society, like we don't have a place for people's magic. And I also think that that creates a big problem. We just label little kids as like, oh, you're a weirdo. And what if he's super talented and special, you know? And then I think that we try and tap down these gifts in our little people, and we grow up into big people who feel repressed, who feel like we're not expressing ourselves, who feel like there's
Right.
something wrong with us when we're not in touch with our spiritual world. And so it's been very helpful for me to be able to recognize that I'm a deeply spiritual woman and be able to claim that and stop thinking that I was just a weirdo. Like I was so socially awkward my entire life, and I'm still super weird. I mean, But now I like being weird. And what's pretty cool is that when I stopped trying to fit in and just was like, all right, you know what? I'm the good kind of crazy. I live in the Mexican mountains. I sing mantras all the time and I'm, talking to goddesses and praying and doing vision journeys and drinking my cacao. Like I found so many beautiful people who are the vibrational match to me, and now I have awesome friends and beautiful
Yeah.
relationships. And when
Yeah.
I was trying to fit in, I had like surface level, vapid, bummer friendships.
Yeah, yeah, same where you're like, I feel like you don't actually even maybe like me that much, or what's going on? Why am I trying so hard for your validation? I don't even know if we're really friends. And
Exactly.
it is, yeah, and I think what you said earlier too with when you decide to love yourself, which I think is the root cause of so many of these issues that arise in our health and, especially when it comes to like behavior and or sorry, addiction and substance use is like
Yeah.
this lack of feeling worthy and kind of abusing ourselves and numbing out through substances and just realizing that when you decide to love yourself after going through life not doing so, there's no area of your life that goes unaffected by this
Oh, yeah.
level of awareness because it like you said it's like a person who loves themselves would not tolerate those shitty relationships. A person who loves themselves would have boundaries around things that make them uncomfortable. A person that loves themselves would eat differently, would move differently, would think differently, would have a different inner dialogue. So it's like, yeah, really having to look at all of that is quite the process.
Yeah.
And,
Well, I want to kind of finish my story is if that's okay,
oh,
because I
yes,
got to the part where I made it to Mexico, and
yes,
I
yes,
was
yeah.
my shaman therapist convinced me to go off the psych drugs and I did it. And I tapered off all three of those drugs in 3 months, which is just an obscenely short taper considering the circumstances. But she really didn't know any better either. And I had very, very extreme withdrawal. I was so unwell. And it was very interesting at that moment in time. My shaman therapist, went to Europe. The guy I was dating left. I was in a brand new country. I didn't know anybody. And then my job also dried up and disappeared. And so I was like, just jobless by myself in Mexico, so sick I could barely get out of bed. It was like an extremely intense situation. And I was unwell for a couple months, like just critically, like could barely leave the house, unwell. And it's interesting because a lot of people, when they experience psych drug withdrawal, are like, okay, I'm going to go back. But I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that it was so extreme. There was no question in my mind whether or not the psych drugs were doing this to me, Because sometimes what happens is people go off a drug and they'll feel unwell and
And
they'll
they
be like,
think
oh,
it's,
it's because
I
I
need it.
am anxious or I'm
My
depressed or
imbalance,
whatever. Exactly. And
chemical
so
imbalance. Yeah.
exactly. And so I will say that like because it was so extreme, it was clear to me that the problem was these substances. And I was like, I am not going back. Look at what they're doing to me. And so I just wrote it out. And after like 6 months, I started feeling better. And after 9 months or so, I was like, wow, I am better than I thought possible for my own self. Like, I started sleeping for the first time in my life. And I just began discovering there were all of these kind of functions that are normal that I recovered. I got to be my own self. And that was such a huge gift. I mean, being medicated from 12 years old, like, one of my biggest motivators was just who am I without these drugs? Like, what if I'm a different person? And I discovered that I was much more grounded and regulated and just had my head on straight than I thought. And I was like, I'm not crazy. I thought I was crazy for all of these years and that I was profoundly broken. And that was a total lie. I am better off without these substances. What I will say though is I began having these mystery illness collapses that would happen on and off and has been the case for about 5 years now. And earlier this year, I discovered that too fast taper and withdrawal left me with a traumatic brain injury and autoimmune disease in my cerebellum, which is the part of your brain that alcohol and benzos affects.
Wow.
which I think is very, very interesting. And I've now become more connected to a community of people who we'll call them the psych system survivors, who have
Mm.
also have stories of withdrawing off these drugs. And autoimmune disease is actually quite common. I hear quite a few stories that are remarkably similar to mine. And I mean, I don't have any sort of scientific study to quote for you. I really just have heard a lot of anecdotal stories where there's some scary, sad things that happen when people taper off these drugs too fast. And
What do you
thankfully,
think? And obviously, no pressure to like this, just your own theories on what do you think is the connection to autoimmune? What do you think it could be?
well, autoimmune disease is your body attacking itself. And so I think that there's something for me to do with um, I think that there's something in your body that shouldn't be there. And that could
Trauma that you're not
potentially
healing when you're on the drugs, perhaps.
the yeah, like there's something that your system doesn't like, and so it begins attacking itself.
Mhm.
In my case, I've thought a lot about this, Katie, because I deeply believe that our systems are so smart and they're telling us something, and often physical illness is a manifestation of something that you couldn't handle process consciously, and so it goes into your body and then your body is trying to process it for you. I look at my story, and when I was a kid there was a lot of chaos, and I had this like chaotic energy thing that was going on with me, and so then there was a lot of disassociation and trying to tap my energy down and like numb myself. And then I get off of all of these drugs, right? And instead of being able to just fly free, my system decided to continue kind of collapsing me and tapping me down. And I almost feel like for me personally, that I couldn't handle my own energy. I couldn't handle being like completely full force. And
Mhm.
so in some ways I was using illness to mitigate that. And I feel like I'm really lucky that I found out I have autoimmune disease. The statistics for that are it normally takes people 10 years and 30 doctors to find out to get an autoimmune diagnosis.
Yeah.
So the fact that it took me 5 years and I don't know, at least 10 or 15 healers and specialists and whatnot, I'm pretty lucky. And I really believe that the reason I received that diagnosis is because I was ready to heal and move on from this mystery illness scenario. And I think that the challenge for me now is, hey, Amber, can you can you feel and receive your full energetic force in a way that nourishes you and resources you and makes you strong and powerful instead of makes you crazy? And so I personally wonder if for me, I just had a very long journey before I got to the point where I'm now actually have the tools to handle my own self without drugs or illness.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah,
all in these
almost like it
mystery
was kind of
realms, so I don't
slowing you
know, but
down to get
yeah.
the to resource yourself with what you need to like fully blossom, which is a really interesting way of looking at it too, you know.
hmm I've
Yeah.
been doing a meditation in the mornings where I envision and see my energy that is around me, swirling around me. And I like breathe in and see all the energy and collect it. And then as I breathe out, I bring it into my stomach, to my power center, and I resource myself. And I've been doing that meditation for a while, and it really helps me because then every morning I start out the day being like, okay, all this energy is resourcing me. I can handle it. I got this.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I know. I love meditation. So nice. Talk about I've an escape. That's a good one.
Yeah.
And a fully
Well,
present escape.
yeah, yeah. Well, and over the past, since I detoxed off those psych drugs, there's quite a few things that have happened. But I was, of course, afraid, just like many people who do that. Like, what if I'm not okay? What if I needed those drugs? What if those drugs were helping me? And I found that the opposite was quite true. I was much better without them. And in 2021, a couple years after I did that detox, I had a really difficult life period where I lost a baby and my partner left me. And it was a lot of loss and sadness that happened in that period of time. And I saw a very different version of myself emerge. I sat with my pain, I wept on the floor, I did meditations and breath work, and I really leaned into feeling it 100%. Like instead of running away from the pain, I sat with the pain and I gave myself time and space to do that. I cut back on work and like spent a few months just grieving.
Mm.
And it was a beautiful experience. You know, I think sometimes we really try and run away from pain, but I think it can be exquisite to weep on your knees and feel the depth of heartbreak. Because if we can access like that level of sadness, it unlocks that level of ecstasy and joy on the other side. And so that was a really important period in my life where I saw myself being very deep and strong. And it was after that event in 2022, I decided to launch Mental Health Rebels because I felt like, okay, I've proved to me that I'm strong enough to support other people. And I mean, it's great to be like a luminous, glowing yogi or yogini, when life is all sunshine and roses and easy. But I think it's when things really, really fall apart that you
Right.
see what you're made of. And so for me, I've passed my own personal tests
Yeah. I
and feel
took
like
that.
I can claim this new version of myself, shall we say.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. I felt like that as well when I stopped drinking and had many times of like crying at home, just like I'm not even really sure what I'm sad about. I think I'm just sad from years of like not feeling my feelings and dealing with things that I never really kind of dealt with or just sort of pushed away. And so that going through that whole process gave me so much confidence to work with other people. And so it makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, it's easy to preach like mindset and staying consistent and discipline and all of these things when your life is going well, but it's like that's when the true test of the toolkit is given, is when shit's hitting the fan. It's like, okay, how's your meditating going now? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
that's when it's like, all right, this is where you dig your heels in and use the tools you have because and you see and you're able to talk to people in moments of pain with true, genuine authenticity, like not just like, oh, try meditating, try this. Like, no, listen, like these things truly help. And I know some people can feel like, oh, like I need something more, I need something now. And it's like, no, you can do this. But speaking of your business, I wanted to ask, how did you land upon mental health rebels, right?
Mental
Yeah.
health
I'm
rebels,
like, why
yes,
did that
yes.
not sound right?
Well, I actually think that being totally sane and present and joyful is a total rebel hero act. I like to talk about the rebel hero journey because this is a hero's journey. There's this cry that we hear from the soul, and we go off looking for answers, looking for a different way. This is not the normal behavior. Like the normal thing is to go to your doctor and say, I feel crappy. And then they give you antidepressants and then to just numb it out. And like that's what our society gives
When
us
you
and
step
tells
out of
us.
that, though, are you like, what is this so weird that more people don't think this is weird? Do you ever, I mean, you must feel that way, right? Sometimes.
Being a being a mental health rebel.
Yeah, just like when you kind of step off the sort of the belief systems that that's normal and you get outside of it, it just is like so mind blowing that and to me like and same thing with like drinking culture and just like things around what is normalized. As soon as you do something that is atypical from what's normalized and then looking at it and you're like, wait, oh my God. And that's what does make people like evangelists because they're like, everybody, I know everybody is doing this, but seriously, there's another
It's the
way.
thing where you can't unsee once you see it too.
Right.
You're like, Okay. Well, we were talking about alcohol earlier. I mean, the way that alcohol is treated in our society to me is so mind-blowing, but I was 100% sold into the story for
Yeah.
years and years and years. And the mainstream story is that, oh, well, alcohol, like when you're celebrating, you should eat cake that's full of sugar and processed food and drink booze and hurt your body. Like, what is that? Like, in order to, if our behavior for being happy is to self destruct, like, that's so incredibly messed up. And I see that now. But when I was believing that narrative, I mean, it seemed completely normal. And because
Yeah.
everyone does that, it feels very normal. And we think that these things that are actually quite harmful for our body are treats that we want to, air quotes, enjoy and that we deserve. And the way that things are sold to us with marketing as well, it's very
Yeah.
twisted and quite malevolent, if you ask me.
Yeah.
um
I know.
but I do really think that it is total rebel behavior to say, I opt out. I no longer buy that narrative. I no longer am going to celebrate by disassociating. When I celebrate, I want to be super, super present with the people I'm with. When I celebrate, I want to feel really good the next day. Like, that's rebel hero behavior right there. And so to me, being a rebel is not some crazy thing. It's actually like all of these very, very simple things. It's coming back to ourselves and our roots. And I think being present is one of the most rebel behaviors that I know of, because finding people who can be truly present with you is so rare
Especially
and
if you're trying to
so
talk about this
special.
shit.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
they're like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I am not like people are not prepared for this, it is interesting. Like when you even start to broach some of these arenas that like the systems that we participate in may not have your best interests at heart, and it might be even beyond like monetary. And it like that whole like conversation is really uncomfortable for a lot of people because it completely makes them question everything they've come to decide is reality.
Hmm. And
So,
so
yeah.
I'm
So,
excited to meet all the rebels. Like, I
yeah.
want us to have a home. Let's all hang out here at Mental Health Rebels.
Yeah,
And
it is.
that's my concept. But the statistics are 1 in 5 people in the United States is diagnosed with a mental health illness, and 1 in 6 people takes a psychiatric drug. So that means 80% of people who get diagnosed with mental health illness choose to take a drug to deal with that. And for me, those are pretty mind blowing statistics. Like, I have now chosen to be the rebel 20%
Hmm.
who deals with her problems in total presence by looking them in the face and soul diving to go even deeper. And it is bizarre behavior in our society, but I can tell you it is so worth it and so
Yeah.
rewarding. And the way that I get to live now and feel life and experience life is honestly exhilarating.
Yeah.
I think that I enjoy and feel alive in a way I did not for the grand majority of my life. Like, I was always searching for the things to make me happy. I was always like going out because I wanted to have fun, but I didn't really know how to do that. Like, I had to get out of that narrative, that mainstream line of thinking, to actually find what I was looking for with these tactics that are sold to us. Because we're told that like the whole goal in life is to have the things and be happy all the time, and have the car and the partner, and I don't know, the great job and this and that. And I did all of that stuff, man. I had the car and the partner and the shoe collection in San Francisco and the job on the 49th floor at Fitbit, and like, I was miserable. It did not work. I had to completely tear down that paradigm and come to a place where I discovered my heart and soul weeping on my knees and like really connecting with the essence of what it is to be alive, which is feeling the full spectrum. It's not happy all the time. It's living deeply. Like, so I talk about all in living all the time because that's what it means to me, is like
Hmm.
experiencing the deep flavor of being human.
Yeah. One thing I really started to do with that, with and like realizing like, wow, I've been creating my life based on, what I'm told externally is a measure of success, continuing to impulsively feel like I need to keep going to school to get another degree or getting a job in a corporation or just even, things that have made me happy, buying a house or this or that, but just recognizing like everything I've been striving for, things I'm told are going to make me happy instead of asking myself, what is going to make me happy? And one big question that has like helped me so much in creating, a weird life where I built a yurt in my yard and have sister circles and garden all the time and sell flowers and coach clients is, what do I want to feel like throughout my day? Not even like, what do I want it to look like? Like, what emotions do I want to be feeling throughout my day? And like, yeah, and that I feel like is something that we've become disassociated from that too. Is like, work is work, you're not going to be happy all the time. This is like what's going to make you happy. And so I feel like we kind of push down a lot of dissatisfaction, lack of fulfillment, thinking it's normal, and it's really not.
So, what does that practice look like for you when you say, what do I want to feel like each day? Are you
Mhm.
consciously choosing your vibration every
Well,
day?
consciously choosing, and what I mean by that is like in terms of work,
Uh-huh.
and building the yurt. Like even when I did do the yurt, it was very much about like I want to have flexibility. I want to feel connected to people. I want to be in community. Like thinking of how I want to feel first instead of the outcome, and then
Mm.
engineering from there. And that to me was a big shift that allowed me to really start creating a life of my own design instead of chasing something external and kind of becoming more aware of our option to choose the life that we have and that we don't just have to kind of funnel ourselves through the pipeline and
Yeah.
even that awareness of choice. I think a lot of people like there's so many circumstances where I was unhappy and I'm like, I have to do this. I don't have any other option. I have bills. I have to pay my way through school or, I worked in hospitality industry for so long and the last at least 5 years of doing it, it was so toxic. I was miserable,
Mm.
all of that. So, yeah, what you're talking about is just, I think that idea, and this kind of leads me to my next question for you about
Yeah.
the idea of, change being really hard, particularly with a story like yours coming off pharmaceuticals, deciding to stop drinking or work on an addiction, just transformation and really building, like you said, living life all in is so hard, taking full agency. And so, how do you feel like someone can take full agency of the transformation that they want to see in their lives?
I think we gotta let the things that are trying to die die. Letting go is a big one. We cling to things because they feel safe, and as humans, we desire to feel safe. It's very important, and I get that. But there was a point in time when I was living in San Francisco, that era I just mentioned, where I had the job in the shoe collection, and I was just trying so hard to get the same things to work, and I was just I went from job to job trying to make it work, and I was trying to date and it wasn't working, but I just kept trying the same thing and like, modifying it a little bit, but it wasn't. And I realized one day, I was like, dude, I am just banging my head against a brick wall. I'm just sitting here going clunk, 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 trying and trying and trying to make the same thing work. And this wall is not moving. I am just getting bloodier and more bruised the longer that I stand here banging my head on this wall. And so turning around and looking and being like, is there an open door here? Is there somewhere else to go? Like, what actually is working and flowing? That's a hard thing to do. When I talk about it, I'm like, "Oh, well, just stop doing the thing that doesn't work and find something that feels good." That can be very challenging. But I think if we can get to a point where we feel in our lives like, okay, I am pushing and pushing in this place and it's not moving, it's not feeling good, it's not working, how can I let it crumble? How can I actually lean into the destruction loops? Because the truth is, as humans, we don't grow when things are just like super easy and peachy and sunshine and roses. We grow through these painful experiences where life falls apart, where we're suffering, where we hurt. And so I think one of the biggest sort of quantum leap tricks that I have discovered is that when things start feeling crunchy and like they're not working, to actually lean into the getting rid of that thing, the letting go, the
Yeah.
moving on and looking for the opportunity because there
Right.
always is one. Like, no
Hmm.
matter what, I believe that even in the most difficult of situations, there is an opportunity to be found. And so the faster we can let go and find that transformation pivot point, find the open door, like the more magical things get. And the other thing that I would throw in there that I find to be one of our most powerful cosmic spiritual tools is our curiosity. Like,
Hmm.
what actually lights you up? Like, what makes you go, ooh, what's that? And like, want to put your nose in there and smell and check it out and scratch around. Like, whatever
Yeah.
that is, go after those things because those are the breadcrumbs that will lead you to where you're actually supposed to go so you
I
can find those open doors.
That's so funny. I was just talking about that with jealousy like recently, just earlier,
Oh,
about how jealousy is like similar. We really villainize it as an uncomfortable emotion. And then because of that, it's kind of our response to it that's actually toxic rather than like, what is this? Maybe I could be interested in that. That might be something I want to do. Like I'm actually kind of inspired by that, and why is this triggering me? And looking at it a little more, and it's just similar to curiosity, just an opportunity to be like, where is this uncomfortable emotion coming from? And yeah,
jealousy is a killer shadow work tool
hmm,
because basically you've been triggered by something someone else has. So that's telling you that
right,
that's something you actually want,
yeah,
or it's something that is repressed within you that you're not allowing yourself to do or think or feel. Or it's something that you hate about yourself that you're seeing in someone else and can't
yeah,
stand. And so I think jealousy is a pretty, I read a book a few years ago all about shadow work, and I started really paying attention to the things that trigger me because
yeah.
those are some amazing tools to discover the subconscious programming that you're running on.
Yeah, I know it really is. And then you're like, oh wow, okay. And um yeah, it's a wild process. I think it really is. But I love what you said about just giving yourself permission to get curious along the way and really leaning into that because I think we don't really give ourselves permission even with we kind of like beat it even with kids sort of not encouraging them to remain curious or to stay connected to their imagination and that's sad. That's something I really want to emphasize in my parenting is like I'm always thinking I'm like well he's only 1.5, he's probably still very connected to the astral plane. I want to ask him about what he has going on in there instead of like deterring him from imaginary friends. I'm gonna be like, what are they saying? Tell me everything, Arthur.
I love that. Oh, Arthur's a great name. I love
Yeah.
this.
Oh, thank you.
I'm imagining this little magical king creature
Yeah, he's
that
a
is
funny
growing
little,
up in your home.
he's such a
Mm.
funny, like little old soul type of
Oh.
old man feeling. But yeah, it is. It's like taking agency is not, my battery's about to die. I just realized. So yeah, I know. I don't have my charger here. Should I pause and grab it or should we wrap up with one? I want to pause and grab it. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
One. Okay, sorry, friends. Technical difficulties have been resolved. But where we left off was really just utilizing kind of rock bottoms or low moments as a catalyst for growth. And
Hmm.
leaning in, I guess you could say, would be the the term instead of trying to escape.
Absolutely. I think that one of the most powerful places that we can be is on our knees, broken. Because there's something quite freeing about when it all crumbles to the ground. Because all those things that you were afraid of, they happened. And then there's nothing left to be afraid of. You're just free to continue on and have your destiny. Like the example that I gave of when I lost my baby and my partner, I had all these plans. Like there was all this stuff that was going on. Like I was going to have a baby and we're going to move in together and this and that and the next thing. And then all of a sudden, just poof, it was all gone. And it was so sad. But there was also this peace that happened in that moment. And I think that if we can embrace the like peacefulness in the death process, that's a really powerful, beautiful moment. And there's this ability to find trust and faith. For me, believing in divine perfection is one of the things that creates flow and peace in my life. Because a lot of times, from a human perspective, we look at stuff and we go, this is so messy. This is so broken. I hate it. It hurts. I don't want to. No bueno. It's bad. And we label it bad and we don't want to deal with it. But divine perfect is so, so different. And later on, we look back and like I've told this giant story today, and there were so many places in that story where I hated it and I did not get it. And it was many years later that I looked back and I was like, oh my God, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me when that fell apart. I'm so glad that I had that meltdown. I'm so glad that life brought me to my knees and broke me so that the thing that needed to die died and I could move on and claim something new. Because in order to make space for new growth, we have to let things go sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
so that trust, like over my life, because there's been so many things that have not worked out, and I have later seen the blessings, I've come to a place where I trust that that's going to happen. I can trust that even though I don't get it and it feels crappy and I'm suffering, it's okay. That I'm gonna be okay. I'm 41 years old, and up until this point, I have survived all the crazy, wild weirdness that has happened to me. And look at me. I'm still fed and clothed and standing here telling you stories. I'm gonna be okay. Like, whatever it is, I'm gonna make it. And if I don't, then that's perfect too, And then it's my perfect moment to graduate from Earth School. But like, I can trust that there is purpose and that it will be perfect even when it seems like a disaster. And so that I also would say is like a very advanced piece of spirituality that if anyone adapts that mindset, their life will suddenly get so much easier. It
Yeah.
will seem like a miracle.
Yeah, it's so, I totally agree with what you're saying about just that allowing things to die. And our resistance to that is such a big piece of our own suffering. When it's like, this is happening for you to get to the other side, to be in like increased alignment with the place you're going and the person you're becoming. But you're clinging on to these things that are there. It's like, like a ball and a chain, literally, like you're dragging along, and it's as if you just like accepted that. And we internalize things as like, oh, rejection of relationships, or like in your case, loss and separation. And it's like, if we stay in a space of like clinging on to it, it's like that energy of resistance, and it really feels like we're slogging through mud. And even when hard things
Mm-hmm.
happens, you embrace it, and it's like, I don't know why this is happening right now, but through my life and through experience and through the evidence I have through my own history, it gives you that increased confidence to continue to lean into faith and lean into trust and lean into hope and know that it's all going to work out. And even if it doesn't look like it in the moment, which is really about one of the most annoying things to say to someone who's pissed off, or even myself, like, it's all happening for a reason, but it's so true. And you start to learn like these are all opportunities for me to grow and evolve and become like a closer version to the person I want to be. And now I look back and things I was upset about when they were happening, I feel similarly where like, oh my gosh, I was so sad that those friends excluded me or like this
Yeah.
happened, and now I was clinging on to these relationships that are been replaced by, like you said, ones that are in complete alignment.
Yeah. Well, and I have some fun stories too. Like we've told a lot of heavy stories today, but
Mm.
for example, a couple years ago at the end of 2022, I ended up in a situation where my home, like my apartment, it was pretty obvious it was time to go. I was having some issues and uh my health was not great, and then I was not in a relationship. I was single, and all of my clients, I was doing digital marketing at the time, wrapped up their contracts and didn't renew. And so I found myself jobless, homeless, relationshipless, and I was like, it was very uncomfortable. And I started doing like the normal things, like looking for a job, looking for an apartment. It was not flowing well. It was not, it was just not happening. And I had this moment where I was like, okay, Amber, it's time to practice what you preach. Can you find an opportunity here? What do you really want to do? And I sat down with myself and I was like, you know what I really want to do? I want to put all my stuff in storage and go traveling. And I had just enough money to swing it. And it was kind of complicated to like do that. It wasn't like I just, from one day to the next day managed to do that. But I was like, okay, that's what I really wanted to do. And then I went back and forth and thought about it for a couple weeks. And finally I was like, I can figure this out. And that would make this so cool and fun. And I ended up doing it. I had this party and I got all my friends to come over and I got everyone to babysit some of my house plants because I had tons of house plants. And I found somebody to babysit my cat and I put all my stuff in storage. And it was kind of like, a thing, like a month where I had to put all my ducks in line. But then I went to Chile, Bolivia, and Peru. And it was one of the most spectacular experiences of my life. And I think I look at that and I'm like, I got to do that because I was willing to embrace the destruction cycle that I was living in instead of trying to force something. So I also want to just say, like, hey, you can make it fun too.
Yeah, yeah, like just kind of getting curious about where you're feeling guided and how external environmental forces are moving you in a direction. Like looking at like in what ways am I resisting the like flow of the guidance? And I
Mhm.
love that. How fun. That's awesome. I've been to Peru, Bolivia, and I've been all three of those countries too. Chile, I was barely. Went to Santiago briefly, but South America is really special.
Hmm. My favorite thing was the salt flats. Did you go and
Yeah,
see the salt
yeah.
flats? Yeah, that was
Got
pretty.
super sunburnt.
Oh, oh.
Because the white, it makes, it's like the snow sometimes too. You think that it like reflects the sun more. And I'm a pasty Irish lady, so I'm sure it's probably drunk or something, forgetting my sunscreen. But
Oh man.
yeah, my crazy travel adventures back then. I am like surprised that I survived, honestly. But yes, oh my gosh, so many good, I feel like just so many good nuggets of wisdom that you shared with it all, and such a hopeful message and just such an empowering one too, I think is so important. Like we do have so many things telling us that, we need to be fixed, or messages saying that, or that, or maybe like you said, not enough messages that tell us like you're just here to take care of yourself and love yourself and express your gifts.
Hmm.
And yeah, I particularly loved what you said too about, isn't it called shaman sickness or something when it's like you're not using your gifts? I forget there's like a phrase for it.
I'm not sure.
When you're not using your gifts and you are kind of in a bad place because of it. I forget. I'll have to look it up now. But
Yeah.
the last question I have for you around healing and coming off is like, what does real healing really look like if you are to kind of succinctly wrap everything up that we've been talking about in a place where it's like, what does real healing look like coming off psych meds for people?
So for me, managing your mental health holistically is I have what I call the mental freedom formula, and it's mindset makeovers. It's changing the way that you think, and this whole conversation is a great example of that. There's a lot of shifting our viewpoint that can just explode the way that we behave and act, and discovering our own subconscious blockers, removing those, and learning to love ourselves. And for me, it's this practicing fierce self care. It is doing what we can with the package that we've got and claiming our agency, claiming our lives. It is also trusting in divine perfection and knowing when something's out of your control and like looking for the magic. And so there's quite a bit that I would say is like mindset, sort of behavioral type of work that we definitely need to do. But then the other component is energy work practices, because we human beings are like, look at me. I'm this whole big body. My head is just a teeny tiny, like what? My head is like 20% or less of my body. I don't even know. And I spend all this time up here in my head thinking in my little internal world. But my whole body, my system, I'm an energetic being, an energy creature. Like we literally have a 3 foot heart radius, like energy camp that is around us. You shuffle your feet on the floor and it makes sparks. The way they can tell you are alive is by an EKG, which is measuring the pulse of your heart. Like, we're energy people. And I think that is not, it's becoming more talked about and more well known. But emotions, all these things that torture us on a mental level, our emotions are just energy in motion. And so learning how to move our energy with intention is a huge, huge thing. And these experiences that we have of like anxiety or depression, they come with physical symptoms. Like when I'm anxious, it's not just that my mind is torturing me. Like my chest is tight. I've got a stomach ache. I can't breathe. So I need to bring this healing into my body. I need to learn how to regulate my physical system in order to, and that can roll up into the mind. It works both ways.
Mhm.
So like yoga, mantras, breath work, dancing, doing art, like whatever we can do to move our energy will be really, really helpful. I recommend that people have a daily practice, which is basically like brain training, system training that you do every day. And then also having coping techniques. So when you have a crisis moment, you've got tools and can pull one out of your toolbox. I mean, for me, just taking a couple deep breaths is one of the top things that I do all the
Mhm.
time when I'm having a rough moment. But there's quite a few different, I also really love EFT tapping as a crisis
Mhm.
coping tool.
Yeah.
So mindset makeover, energy work practices, and then community. We human beings need other human beings, and having people who listen to you and see you is immensely powerful. Connecting with others warms our hearts. It also takes us out of our teeny tiny little world. When I listen to somebody else share and tell me about their problems, I realize that, hey, maybe my package isn't so bad.
Mhm.
Maybe there's other things going on. And so I think it amplifies and expands. And when we share stories, it's such an incredible healing medicine, because I'm able to listen to your story and just take what serves me. And it's not like I'm telling you what to do. It's just an invitation to hear. And then whatever inspires you is obviously the thing that was meant for you. And so I think this connecting with other humans is massively important for us to be well. And any sort of addiction or recovery program has a community component. It's just critical. So for me, that's the big three.
Yes, I know. So good. All of them. Community and mindset. I know we talked about a lot of it triggers as well as another piece of the mindset makeover.
Hmm.
So, thank you for all of your wisdom. I feel like I could just sit and I'm like, this is so nice just listening because the way I was thinking while you were talking about how you were saying, your energy is like just robust and ready, and you have had these life experiences to help you learn to kind of manage your energy in a way that's helpful and healthy for you. And I just listening to you talk, everything you say is so packed with like wisdom and takeaways, and it's just very dense in a good way. Like
Oh, wait, thank
no
you.
wasted words. It feels like, just really meaningful. And so I feel like there was a million uh beautiful little segments and clips and just short, concise, I'm trying to think of the word is it's the opposite of how I'm talking right now.
Katie, that is such a beautiful, beautiful compliment. I
Yeah, it
really
really is.
appreciate
And so
it.
it's like obviously you're getting to a place where it's coming out in just the best way. And so I love listening to you talk about it all and just hearing things that resonate so much for me.
Thank you. Well, since I am an evangelist, it is very exciting for me to get to come here and talk about mental freedom, and I'm really jazzed that you're here helping me promote this message.
Yeah, it's such a good one. And we need to be able to hear more and more stories like this to give people the courage to follow the nudge of feeling, whether it's with substance use in terms of like alcohol or non-prescription drugs, or feeling like they're dimmed down on prescription drugs and wanting to explore and just curious about what life would be like without them, but having so many voices that are like, this is your diagnosis, you're on this for life. I think you need to hear a lot of other voices telling you that there's other paths available before you really start to believe it. It's the mindset makeover, it's all part of it. And I talk to clients a lot about that. Like, really saturate your brain with other stories that are in alignment with where you want to go, because is a really hard path, and it's really easy to let other voices inundate our thinking and make it feel like it's not possible for us. And so hearing as many stories like yours as possible, especially articulated in such like a really kind of to the point, meaningful way that I know a lot of people can resonate with, is we need more of it.
Well, they're all invited over here to Rebel Camp.
Yeah. So tell us, tell us like where everyone can find you with your website, your Instagram,
Yeah.
what you offer.
So my website is mentalhealthrebels.com, and I have an Instagram that's also at Mental Health Rebels. You can find me both of those places. I offer coaching, individual one-on-one coaching, and then I also do free community circles every month through Awakenpedia, which is how
Yeah.
we met one another.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of interested in me, I would highly recommend following me on Mental Health Rebels on social media. I mentioned Instagram because I post there a lot, but I also have a Facebook and I have a TikTok and I have a YouTube. So find me on the internets and come to a community circle. Also offer a free mini coaching session for all new clients. So I really invite people, if they're curious about this, to just have a small conversation with me and get to know me and discover some of the ways that I would recommend working together. I think that people often leave those conversations with new ideas and inspiration. Actually, I don't think that. I know that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I love talking to people. I get really excited about these healing journeys. So, I would love to connect with people and hear what they think and thought and what resonated from this conversation. So, I
Yeah.
just invite you, listener, reach out to me.
Yeah, exactly. Reach out. Such a wealth of wisdom, hope, insight, all of the things. So thank you for being here, and everyone, thank you for listening. I would love to hear what resonated, and definitely, I also feel like I said resonated a million times, but it's a good word. And then like, share, and subscribe to the podcast for moi. I always love to see a new review or a new thought or a new share. It is really nice to see that it is helpful in any way for you all. So have a beautiful day, and thanks again, Amber.
Thank you.